evening, chocolate people. Welcome to the Chocolate Life. I am your host, Mr. Chocolate. Once again, we have our resident co-host, Coach K. How you doing?
I'm doing okay. I don't know if the audience can hear you as well as I cannot. Um, I don't know if your mic need to be turned up a little bit more. Maybe they could just tell you in the chat if they can hear you well enough, and even if they can hear me. I don't know, but I'm doing good. And I just like to say hi, audience. We're glad that we're back. We've been having internet struggle problems. So therefore, we've been missing you guys, and we appreciate you tuning in each time that you join us. As you can see from the title, the ish is hitting the fan. I think it's important that we kind of look at those dynamics. Appreciate Mr. Chocolate allowing me to actually learn podcasting with him and trying to help us to bring a greater awareness to our community and to ourselves. Um, I think for you guys who've seen the title that he used for me as we first started, you saw Chaplain K. And I like to remind you guys, I am a board certified chaplain, but I'm also a life coach. And I much rather use the title life coach because what we're trying to do is to look at how do we navigate this journey we call life and actually build a network across the world. I look at what we are trying to do as a global endeavor instead of being myopic in our view. And looking at the title, I would just like to start at the chaos that's going on not only in America but around the world. For you guys who do not live in the United States, you might be aware that Dubai and Pakistan, excuse me, some of those places have been on the water, and that's kind of disturbing on a global scale because remember last year, Libya had an earthquake. So, as a life coach and a person who deal with reflection and insight and intuition, I do a lot of research on those lines. I don't just use hunches. So, what we're doing is trying to use this podcast tonight to help you to be more reflective, help you to actually look at some of these dynamics that play out. And they don't just play out in one or two areas. We have to be able to look at a global picture while we struggle with whatever we are doing in regular everyday life. For instance, right now, young people around the country are saying no more to the situation of the genocide that's unfolding before our eyes. Okay, which is kind of sad when uh, the white supremacy network that's called the United States government have tried to convince the world that they are the beacon, the light, the exceptional, i.e., Barack Obama's statement, we're exceptional. We're not. Now, I would have to say some of us are exceptional because we have a heart, desire, and the will to continue to try to live an ethical life. Not boasting, but that's what we do. So therefore, you're seeing a few of that ethical value play out with young people. It's disturbing them to see this level of hypocrisy play out before them. And I would like to put a pin in the fact that the three religions that people who call themselves Christians, Judaism, or Islamic are playing out. So therefore, you have to ask the question for yourself. If you subscribe to either one of those doctrines, Now we have to say why. Not asking you to tell us as individuals or the audience, but in your circles every day, why are you still subscribing to any of those doctrines? Because let's start with Christianity, which most people want to continue to beat the drum and say the United States is a Christian country. The United States has never been a Christian country, whatever
Mm-hmm.
Christianity means. Now, if we want to use the real concept and talk about how the the scripture which we call the Bible, and the Bible was created in 1455 when the printing press over in Germany, Gutenberg uh, printing press created the first Bible. So that is true. And some of this stuff that we're going to talk about tonight is going to be just reflective of some of the other conversations we've had, such as, like right now, the young people who uh, are having protests around the campus. But we're going to stick with the religious part first. Uh, you got these three entities in religion. Black people delivered themselves from this idea that white people brought over, and it was always a military front. That's what religions are. They're military fronts, and they use the clergy to beat the drum to keep people quailed and held in space. Uh, don't believe me? Research Achobe's book. Achobe is I think he's Congolese writer who wrote about Things Fall Apart. And that's a really good book for all of us to actually look at, because he was an artist, he was a writer, but he used the book to talk about real life on how the continent that we now call Africa fell in the hands. Um, well, apparently, if I'm looking at the book now, that he comes from the people that now call themselves Nigerian. And I use that called themselves Nigerians because before 1884, the continent had no countries. So one of the things that Professor Lumumba from Kenya is trying to help the whole continent to reimagine is, what will the continent look like without these borders? Borders were set up by Europeans because Europeans love to control. That is part of the dynamic of white supremacy. It has to control stuff. It make up rules. It moves the needle all the time. So you can never really quite get on board unless you plan to stay in the system of white supremacy. And my hope is that enough of us around the world can become of one mindset to literally destroy the rule of white supremacy, because that's the gauge and the gate that is holding the earth hostage. These billionaires who have made money off of regular people, specifically melanated people. If you look at China, you look at Russia, you look at any parts of Europe, i.e., France or Great Britain being the two dominant ones, and then Germany, because Germany is the people who committed genocide on the continent, and that was their template to come back and commit genocide on their own people. However, we fall into the mindset of using white supremacy language because we will say the Holocaust. That wasn't the Holocaust. The Holocaust in Germany was the second German Holocaust, which was called the Third Reich. The Second Reich happened on the people of Namibia. So we have to do intelligent, resourceful, thoughtful, intellectual research so we can have conversations with young people. The continent has the most young people on any continent, and they are ripe, as you use the phrase, ripe for the pickings. And if we don't work together to make things happen, to be a global community, yes, we on this continent were here before the Europeans, but we have become so divided and so divisive until there are so many labels. You got ADOS, you got Foundational Black Americans, you got people who call themselves other kinds of names, yet at the same time, Indigenous American who have been called colored, who have been ostracized, and it was a legal genocide that was done by Walter Peckler back in the 1920s to really erase melanated indigenous people from everything. Okay? And when I say everything, if you don't have a legal standing in a place where you reside, then you're invisible. Think of how they talk about the benefits that the illegal immigrants get, and they get more benefits that we, who our ancestry were here before Europeans, get. Hopefully, we can learn to have a different conversation where all voices are blended, regardless if we call ourselves American descendants of slaves, African Americans, and learn to know that African and America, if you're going to do it in that terms, and once upon a time I said no, but if you're going to do it in that terms, understand or teach that you're talking about two different continents, the Americas, not America meaning United States, but Black people in itself belong to us. See how I changed that? Black is not a nationality. Black is not an ethnicity, just like white is not. If you check any passport, you're not going to find white. You're not going to find Black. So we need to know how to interchange words, and when we're talking in our circles, to know how to use the words so everybody is on one page. Black, and I've heard various podcasters who are they have a whole lot more people listening to them than you guys listening to us, which is not a problem for me, maybe a problem for you guys, but I'm hopeful that we will build a network, and a network that's going to be viable for the community and for whatever it is you are trying to do in life, and be passionate about that. That has never been done, because white supremacy is about control. What we're trying to teach you is you learn how to control yourself. That is what Mayat is about. Back to the religious component. You have people who call themselves saying they're part of Judaism, yet and still what you see on TV is governments trying to quail or silence voices who are not on board with the Israelis' white supremacist form of government, and they hijack Judaism. Well, I can use the same premise and tell you that the word itself, Christianity, was also hijacked from these people who are now claiming to be white nationalists or Christian. Christianity has nothing to do with Jesus. And if you can actually start looking at it from that angle, perhaps you can stretch and help your community and help people to understand the dynamic of Christianity, meaning anointed one, meaning you yourself can be that anointed one. That does not mean that you are quote unquote looking to this image or this personality that a European set up for you to actually quote unquote worship. I would have to ask the question now in 2024, if you're going to worship Jesus and some people tell you, well, you can't worship your ancestors, I would ask you, what's the difference? Not trying to have that conversation about worshiping, but for you to stretch your own imagination Why is it you cannot worship your grandfather, your grandmother, your great grandparents, or whomever in your circle when they are the people you knew you could put eyes on, or you have pictures of them? And the only thing you have of Jesus is this concept that somebody gave you, and now you got Russia saying Jesus was black. Well, all of those are propaganda way of keeping you focused on their quote unquote religion. And that is the religion of Christianity, okay? Which were military forms of keeping people in line, because all you have to do is give them something to hold on to be hopeful, and they will worship that. I would say, why don't you worship you? Why don't you understand Mayat? And I will keep saying Mayat until you guys understand and go look up Mayat for yourself. It's part of psychology. It's learning to be responsible. It is learning to be accountable. It is learning to hold yourself to some type of ethical principles every day, not just one day a week, but every day. And then if we become individuals who can find groups of us who want to hold ourselves accountable and then hold each other accountable, we can follow this narrative. Let's get to Islam, because we see this with Black people in the United States. I'm not going to talk about the United States on certain things, but on other things, I'm going to talk about the global community. In the United States, Black people freed themselves from this concept and this idea of white Christianity, because white Christianity was still trying to hold Black people in that space and said they had no souls. Where either you had a soul or you didn't have a soul. Which one is it? This is what white supremacy has done, meaning these people who had really no spiritual concept, but they do have religion. They do love to worship each other. They do love to worship power. And that power is the dynamic that they worship. That's the easiest way for me to put white supremacy in focus. But later this year, I'm going to give you an abstract so you can start doing your own research on how to understand, how to have conversations in your area. Because we also look at those dynamics, and there was no, let me get back, I'm get back to that, because we're going to talk about the sex part later. When I say the ish is hitting the fan, it is because people don't know what to do with all of these things that's causing us to be in chaos. Well, white supremacy created chaos, i.e. the United States and the last colony of white supremacy, which is Israel. They created this ish that's, hitting the fan. And they tried to bring Iran into it, and Iran said no, and they let them know, we got that smoke for you if you want it. And they told them what they were doing. And at the same time, they allowed no one to be hurt. You can go look at any podcast where people who used to be ex-CIA, ex-military, ex-intelligent, listen to all of these people. Don't take my word. Don't take Mr. Chocolate's word. Just do your own homework and listen to various voices across the country who will give you an analysis on what Iran did. Now, Iran is no hero for us to worship either. That's why I say it's imperative that we learn all of these dynamics, but learning how to stay focused on what we need to do to be a community. Because we need community as a global group of people. We don't have that. We don't have it in the United States. We don't have it in the Caribbean. We don't have it on the continent. We don't have it in Asia. We don't have it on the only island that is in community that I can think of right now is North Sentinel, because they decided they don't want none of us or none of them on their island. And they've been doing this, according to research, for 30,000 years. So if they've been doing that for 30,000 years, we can do that too. Meaning we can live in community, we can learn how to work together. We were the first people. Black means chem, Khem, which is the chemical component that make us who we are. If in fact you hear anybody else on any platform try to tell you blacks means void and all of that, those are English words. English is not the first language of the indigenous people around the world, nor is Spanish, nor is French. So if you're going to use the Webster and Merriam and all of those dictionaries to look up these words that we have embraced, and I embrace black, although I didn't grow up with embracing black because that's what my mom taught us. Never understood what a colored person was either because that's what they grew up and that's what they taught us. But when they start saying African American, people got kind of bent out of shape because people were trying to find their own identity. Yes, it's imperative that we find our own identity, but I'm adopting black because I'm adopting the ancient title, Kim. Kim means black. That is the chemical component that makes the melanin in me. And I hope you adopt that too. Not because, once again, not because I said so, but because you go do a deep dive so you have your own identity. And after that, we can move from trying to frame ourselves to be Nigerian, Kenyan, Singalinese, Liberian. We can move from that if we choose to. Because then we start looking at, well, what is the chemical component to bring us back to our ancestors who were the original people who started this thing we call creational civilization. Once again, we were here long before Europeans. We were building civilizations. And while young people are fighting for one cause right now, once that cause is addressed, and they have to figure out what's next. Mr. Chocolate, I'm hearing a feedback a little bit. We just started. They have to figure out what's next. And what I'm trying to get us to see, we can determine what's next by looking at nearly full of principle. And I'm gonna ask Mr. Chocolate to come in for a moment and just remind us of these different areas that white supremacy cover in all of civilization, all of society. And then I'm going to come back and then tie this all together. Hopefully you write these different areas down so we can start looking at them in our lives when something is awry, out of balance, whatever you want to use it, so we can start looking at it for ourselves so we'll know what to address. Because I'm going to come back with the stuff that's going on with the campuses, and then we're going to move forward. Mr. Chocolate.
All right. These 9 areas, and just looking at them, I think he did them in alphabetical order. The first area is economics. The second one is education. The third one is entertainment. The fourth one is labor, as in the workforce. Labor. The fifth one is law. The sixth one is politics. The seventh one is religion. The eighth one is sex. The ninth one is war and counter-war.
Thanks for
areas.
Thank you for reminding us of those 9 areas, because those 9 areas are playing out in so many different ways for us. And I'm going to go through and just talk about, just give examples of each one. Labor. The United States is pretending that it is allowing the illegals to come over here because they want labor. They want a better life. And then we have to ask the question, okay, so you're allowing them to come over and have a better life, whereas we already here, been here, and we don't have a better life? Some of us, we know people who are living on the streets. We know people who can't even get food for their children. Or we know people who have been locked up for crimes they did not commit. Yet and still, we saying that we're letting people who come over here from other countries, they haven't had any background checks. But that's the labor meaning to move us so they can continue this thing, this system they set up. And remember, it was the labor force that white supremacy set up before they did anything else to start building their economy. Okay? Their economy is one of the things that we as Black people, who was the labor, because we've been all of these things for the whole system. And now it's time for us to build our own. In other words, the labor that we do in the future, or we teach our children that the biggest work that you do, hopefully you start doing it for yourself. So we start teaching our children very early in life that you're beautiful, you have gifts, and first of all, we're going to stop allowing them to go to schools that crush their dreams, their everything about them, so they can expand their own horizon or their own creativity, and they end up working for other people. We don't need to be working for other people at this time. For instance, places called hospitals get all kinds of money from the government, yet and still the hospitals don't treat us right. Hospitals were set up for the poor initially because rich people could always get a doctor to come to their houses. So we have to rearrange our thinking on how to address these particular components of Mussolini Sula's principles. Education is so important because if we can be indoctrinated early in life, then we continue to act like that elephant and walk around that stake as if that stake is holding it in place, when in actuality the mindset is now holding that 2-ton elephant in place, not the stake that was placed on the elephant foot when it was a baby elephant. But that's what white supremacy has been doing. And now that ish is hitting the fan. Because as we can see in higher education, first of all, USC decided they didn't want their valedictorian to do her speech last week. And she didn't allow any of the white medias to sidetrack her to try to derail what she wanted to say at graduation, which she was not allowed to do. But now all of them have decided they're going to occupy the campuses, since the administrations of all of these universities, major elite universities, and some of them who are private universities, and some of them is not quote unquote the name university, but you had university campus students doing the same thing they did back in 1967 and 68. Wash, rinse, repeat. This is the same thing all over again, but now it's not just Kent State versus Jackson State, where Jackson State students got killed. And really some of Kent State did too, and then they shut it down. Because the United States have always allowed government, state-sponsored militias to quail young people. Okay? So we must look at these things and see how they're playing out, not only in the spaces where quote unquote we can say, well, it's them. No, everything comes back to us. Because if they can shut their voices down, guess what? They know they can shut our voices down. So we have to still push, and we have to still push, but keep focused on us. Yes, I'm happy to see young people do whatever they're doing, but it can also be like the Black Lives Matter movement when George Floyd got killed. You saw white people getting in the street. You saw white people getting in, but you saw white people getting in the street. You also saw people putting their own flags up, talking about their lives matter. It's like, but the thing is about Black Lives Matter. So how is it you went from Black Lives Matter to all of these other people with all of these other different flags? That's where we get off point and off focus, simply because other people may join in what we call our struggle. Our struggle is for survival. Nobody's going to do that harder than we are. And if we're not going to stay focused, then we will end up like we are actually treading water right now. Because we've seen this. We saw this in the 60s. And somewhere in the 70s, we thought we had arrived. We allowed people like the Barack Obama, the Al Sharpton, the John Lewis's, the John Conyers, all of these old people who some of them are now dead, tell us that, we are beyond blackness. Is no more, it's no more racism, when racism run the government. So we have to know how to have all of our own, as people use, talking points. We have to learn how to do this in whatever environment we are in and whatever conversations we are having, because it still come back to control. And how do we control people and their narrative? That thing they call freedom of speech, freedom of expression, we seeing it play out in politics. We see Donald Trump, who is a menace to society, but he's only an avatar of what the actual society look like. He and Joe Biden. Joe Biden is, and I always say that, Joe Biden is no different than Donald Trump. They just work in different angles. And they got Black people up in Chicago now saying they're turning the city red. I would suggest to you guys who are listening to us right now to suggest to the people who are in the voting arena, who still quote unquote think it's important to vote for president and not vote against presidents. In other words, we can vote no confidence. I don't see where either one of these people are serving the good of Black people. Now, they may be serving the interests of other entities, such as those parties they represent. But Donald Trump planned to do everything a dictator will do if he gets back in office. Donald Trump is a very hateful person. Donald Trump is a criminal, has been a criminal his whole life. But he's had the protection of his whiteness and his money to keep him out of prison, like it is right now. He even has a Supreme Court who are teetering on actually giving him a wink and a nod to some of his criminality. Donald Trump sold government documents to other countries. So how is he supposed to be a quote unquote a person who is good for the country? Even if Joe Biden dies tomorrow, Donald Trump is a horrible person for the country. And for anybody who thinks Donald Trump versus Joe Biden is an option, that's kind of bad also, because that means we have not learned how to think outside the boxes. We can vote no confidence for the office of president until we can do something different. We actually can do something different. That's what a democracy does. Remember, Joe Biden was chosen by his party leaders to be the candidate who's running for president. The people didn't do that. None of the people in the United States did that. The Democratic Party did that. And now people are trying to run in different arenas because the Democratic Party would not allow anybody to run against Joe Biden. Joe Biden is a horrible person just like Donald Trump. Both of them support the genocidal state of Israel. There is no difference between the two. You have people who have foreign interests who run the governments of this country. Now, the the FBI and all of the government entities can actually bring this under control if they choose to. But even the FBI has never chosen to bring justice to this country because starting with J. Edgar Hoover, the FBI has been crooked ever since he ran it. Bill Barr, who worked with Donald Trump, was just as wicked and evil, and now he's pretending he not against Donald Trump yet and still quote unquote said he's gonna vote party line. Well, he was gonna always vote for Joe Biden, I mean for Donald Trump. This is a side note. Bill Barr's father wrote a book about an island. Okay? His father gave Jeffrey Epstein a job. Jeffrey Epstein formed the island that you can actually say was in Bill Barr's father's book. How is it that Bill Barr's father has this mental makeup and he didn't pass it on to his son? Maybe he did, maybe he did. But Bill Barr is no saint. This man went around the world trying to find dirt on Joe Biden when he was a attorney general for Donald Trump. So none of these people have melanated people interests. That includes us here, the people in the Caribbean. And when I say the Caribbean, think of what Haiti is going through. You have a Haitian press secretary for Joe Biden who has never said one thing positive about what's going on in Haiti. Matter of fact, it's almost as if Haiti does not exist, and this woman is Haitian. But this is what happened when we distance ourselves from our own roots. And the roots of humanity is melanin. I don't care if you came from whatever part of the world. I don't even care if your skin is pale because pale skinned people, another side note, produce dark skinned people because all pale skinned people didn't brown, okay? They had a condition called albinism. So if we can stretch our imagination beyond the concept of people who came out of Europe, they all were pale-skinned people. No, they were not. Some people came out of Europe as dark skin, even though pale-skinned people had that. Okay, but I'm going to get back on this because we got wars who are tuning up in the United States and Israel. Israel is trying real hard to create a war with Iran while Israel is stiff. I don't know if you know, I watched today. The Israeli community want Benjamin Netanyahu gone, like today. They have just as a bigger crowd in Israel protesting Benjamin Netanyahu and the IDF, just like the young people on the campuses in the United States. Now, mind you, the people in Israel are in the streets to get rid of Benjamin Netanyahu, and they want their loved ones back. So even though they're protesting, the protesting still is not the same. Okay? The people here are protesting because they want the United States to stop financing wars. And the United States just sent $95 billion to finance more wars. So for the politicians to tell us that they cannot grant reparation for the descendants who went through the system of segregation, and I'm just going to use Jim Crow now, because some of our ancestors were never quote unquote slaves, yet and still Jim Crow through white supremacy stripped them of everything that their ancestors built for them. And we have to know, like I said, we have to know how to have two different conversations, but still come to the same conclusion that Black people who went through Jim Crow deserve reparation. And that is what we need to have to build an economic base, not just here. We are watching people around the world who are telling the European government that you owe us reparation. So you see how we become the template for everybody around the world, yet and still when melanated people come over here, somehow they still want to talk bad to the original people. When I say original, I'm talking about people who original fought back against the system of white supremacy. That's us. Nobody can take that away from us. It was people right here in the belly of the beast, our ancestors, our elders, who decided to fight this government. So if we're going to start looking at, while all of this ish, because the ish, like I said, it's hitting the fans. It's hitting the fans on the campuses. It's hitting the fan in cities such as, and I'm going to use Chicago and New York. And we can use Houston, using those three cities. Well, let me just throw Memphis in there. And I would need to throw Memphis in there because you guys need to know this. Memphis has a police chief. This female worked with and was trained by the IDF. Where am I going with this? The IDF want Cop City to be a thing. So the IDF, which is the Israeli Defense Force, can come over and have training for all of the people around the world so they can keep everybody around the world in check. That's why Cop City should never be built. But you got too many Black people down in Atlanta taking payoffs, but the citizenry shut it down, and I'm happy. Same thing with New York. New York mayor had the audacity to try to bring all of those immigrants, or allow them, because Greg Abbott allowed all of these immigrants to go to different places, he and Ron DeSantis. So you see how this game is played. You got two Republican governors paying for people to go to New York, Martha's Vineyard, Chicago. Okay, those are three big places that they call blue states. But they're playing games with us as regular people, specifically Black people. None of these people have our interests if they're not talking about reparation. Reparation is what we need. We don't need them teaching us no more schools. We don't need them teaching us no more about quote unquote anything that has to do with religion. We don't need them giving us no more jobs. We can create our own jobs. We really do not need white supremacy except for to give us what is rightfully ours. Now I want to shift gears for a little bit, because some people we do need to look at and start looking at. If you guys are not aware who Dr. John Henry Clarke is, you may want to look him up, specifically look up a website, a YouTube channel called Historical Africa, and look up the title, Colonizers' Religion Has Destroyed African Belief System. That's Dr. John Henry Clarke. Dr. John Henry Clarke is one of our senior scholars who started on this journey by teaching himself. This man was, first of all, he was a writer and he was an artist, but he taught himself history and he got a degree and he became a professor up at Hunter College. That's all I need to say about Dr. John Henry Clarke. The rest of it, this is a person we all need to know. Second person we need to know is Tony Browder. Okay? Tony Browder, beautiful man, graduate of Howard University, does a tour every year taking people to Kemet, the place people call Egypt, taking people to Kemet so they can understand the ruins. He also does a national dig. He is the only black person over there who has one. Most people do digging or archaeological digs. They're usually white people or people who call themselves Arabs. Arabs, you have to ask yourself the question now, what is an Arab? Okay. But Tony Browser, if you would check, and I don't know how old this broadcast is. He did it on a Rock Newman show. He considered himself a memory recovery specialist. Why am I talking about some of these people? Because these are the people who give us actual facts about not only our history, but how it has been miseducational, or how it has been mislabeled and presented to us. And I'm going to go back to Dr. John Henry Clarke and African belief system. Because the African belief system before 1884 was spirituality. It wasn't religion. Religion is something white people have given African spirituality. So therefore now you got people almost 200 years later saying African religion versus African spirituality. You have too many people on the continent who call themselves either Islam or Christian, or they're still fighting for the title of being Israelites, which the actual people who were Jews, and please listen to this carefully, the actual people who were Jews, which was a group of people who are melanated, but they don't follow the Torah. That's the significance, because they are older than the Torah in the way white people teach the Torah. So what I'm trying to get us to do, if you want to hold on to those branches of what you call religion, do so. But know that African spirituality in its rarest form, in its original form, has nothing to do with religion. Religion has co-opted everything melanated people did, or how they taught their communities that this is how we understand life, how life gives us energy, how life, the creation, is this source of, if you want to use the title, God, and that is a creation of humanity. But if you want to say that God in you, then by all means, own it. Because then you become the destined, you become the master of your own destiny. Now, these people call themselves kings or presidents. They don't mind by using those titles. Yet at the same time, they subjugate other people. And that's why I said we have to learn to understand the difference between spirituality and religion, because none of these religions help the people. The Islamic tradition, for most of us, we think of it in terms of Shiite or Sunni. I would like to add in there the Nation of Islam. Okay? Can anybody in the audience say whether they're Shiite or Sunni? Or are they just an offshoot of Islam, and they did the same thing black people did with this idea of Christianity, and they created their own space based on what was helpful to them out of these manifestation of what people call spirituality, but it's really religion. Or the same thing with Judaism. I just talked about the original people who were practicing Judaism, because Judaism is older than the concept of people calling folks Jews. So I'm careful to say Judaism. People who practice Judaism and did not practice the Torah were always melanated people. Those are the people that the scripture have hijacked to say they went into hiding, or they were taken from their original space. When I say their original space, because these are the people who lived in what we now call Canaan. At the time, the Romans occupied that area and started killing them. Okay, and this is the third, the centuries before what you call AD. Okay, a lot of information here, but all of this is going on. We have people who still trying to hold us to these doctrines, while at the same time, young people are not gravitating toward any of them. They just consider them all hypocrites, and rightfully so. Because these doctrines, religion, have played a horrible part in allowing sexual deviance to mess up the minds of all people, not just young people, males and females. And now I'm going to bring a piece in that's top news right now, and that is the Sean Cohn situation. But if you do a deep dive for yourself and look at Sean Combs in the context of Neely Fuller, you will find that Sean Combs allowed all of the deviant acts that people talk about in this concept that they call Sodom and Gomorrah. Newsflash, there was no Sodom and Gomorrah. But if you want to know what they did in Pompeii, then you can go read about Pompeii and see where Sean Combs fit in there. But I want us to look at Sean Combs and look at Jeffrey Epstein and do a simultaneously deep dive with both of them. Because they pretty much been doing in Jeffrey Epstein case, he's dead. But they did the same thing. What Cohn is doing now, doing the same thing. Supposedly, Sean Cohn is on the payroll of the FBI. When the United States government first arrested Jeffrey Epstein, supposedly the Acosta guy down in, who was the attorney general that Donald Trump was trying to put on his cabinet, let Jeffrey Epstein go. So they made that a public story at the time, because the Republicans and the Democrats like to fight against each other, but they really don't like helping people. They just like power also. But if you're going to do a deep dive with both of those men represent a power structure. You also have to ask the question, not only who was financing Jeffrey Epstein, who's financing Sean Combs? Because Sean Combs is not really financing himself. And Sean Combs is doing this for a long time. According to reports, Sean Combs, the young lady whose lawsuit got squashed in one day, or settled, quickest lawsuit in history, which opened up other information. But some of the internet people are looking at the smaller picture. And when I say smaller, because if we don't look at Jeffrey Epstein and Sean Combs in the same light, yes, it's bad to see that Diddy did this to a lot of melanated people. But you also have to ask the question, who else is Diddy hiding or hiding from? Because then we get back to the leverage that both of these men were doing with the power structure of governments. The same thing that Neely Fuller is talking about. And if you want to try to do a deep dive and look at it, you can use these as your case studies. These two men and what they represented. Not looking at just them, look at what they represented. Because both of these men had, in Geddes case, had a lot of power. And they went into circles with a lot of different people. Remember, Diddy Combs was up there with President Obama. Not saying that President Obama went to his free calls, because Jay-Z was hanging out there too. But you still have to be honest and have honest conversations about what does this look like and how has this been allowed. I think in terms of what the young lady said, that Sean Cohn was selling her. Well, and this is for us to do other dives. Sean Cohn and Jeffrey Epstein represented what Asians and Europeans did for 1,000 years. Asians in being brothels. Look it up for yourself. But if you talk about 1,000-year history of running brothels, they've been making money off of selling people for a long time. Okay? Now, people who decide to participate in their grown, that's one thing. But people who do not decide to participate, that is a whole nother story. We know children don't decide to participate. And we know that with both of these men, that children have been bought and sold to very rich people. Yes, we can look at Cassie. We can look at even the way Harvey Weinstein is now out of jail, although people wanted to castrate Bill Cosby. So we have to continue to do deep dives for ourselves so we can make sense of all of this is playing out. Remember, Sean Cohn represented the entertainment part of what he's doing. Jeffrey Epstein represented the political side of all the stuff he was doing because supposedly he worked for Mossad. Mossad is the secret service of Israel. He also worked with the United States government. But what is it that they killed or tried to kill when they killed him? Yes, the Dufresne young lady who sued Jeffrey Epstein won a case. But then you have to go back and ask, how is it that this young lady was employed at Mar-a-Lago, which is Donald Trump's place, and even her father worked there, and she was groomed from Mar-a-Lago, and that seemed not to ever be a part of the story when Jeffrey Epstein is being talked about. So was Mar-a-Lago running a grooming place? That's something everybody has to ask. If this young woman who sued Jeffrey Epstein worked for Mar-a-Lago when the female counterpart to him started her in what they call the massage parlor. So Diddy is not the only one. And I hope we don't get sidetracked while all of the ish is still hitting the fan, because it's just starting. But so are we. It is my hope that you guys have learned a little bit tonight where you can tap into whatever arena you want to tap into. I'm hoping that you guys continue to not only just listen, but bring people in who are serious about making a difference in the community. If we can actually do that for each other, it is my hope, my dream, my concern that we can build a network where we can affect change around the world, where we can bring the earth back into balance. And the earth cannot be in balance if we're out of balance. It just doesn't match up. So with that information tonight, and I just wanted to just give you a little bit to think on, because next month we're going to talk about some things that we need to guard ourselves against. We're going to talk about war and how to become warriors. And I'm using war because that's what we're in. We're in the middle of not only a physical war, we're in the middle of a spiritual war. And we have to learn how to navigate both spaces. But as far as our community, we're going to talk about many of the people who are left out of history. And for you guys who have been listening, if you would just go back and listen to the podcast where we talked about World War One and World War Two, we're still seeing the same effect. Because in World War One, what's the man named the President? Woodrow Wilson set up segregation. This is the President of the United States. He set up segregation against the very people who were serving the country. Some of these men never got benefits. So simply because they moved the quote unquote the idea that segregation no longer exists in the military. Yes, it does. Because under Donald Trump, young people who went to service, young man got killed over in Niger. Donald Trump never told you how that soldier got killed in Niger. Donald Trump didn't care about that soldier being killed. His parents did. But not only did he get killed, that young man got cut up. Just giving you the horrors of war and how the leaders of the country do not care about us. So we got to care about ourselves more. Likewise, Joe Biden pretended to be the friend of the three young people who recently got killed over in Jordan. But you have to ask the question, why were they in Jordan? Was the United States doing a secret mission? The United States doesn't have a base in Jordan. Or do they? And we don't know about it publicly. So these are the conversations that are on the horizon. So my hope is that you guys not only learn something, but are become ready to do more deep diving with us, where we can just show you how the global community look, the issues we're facing, and what we must do as a community to not only bring wholeness, bring healing, but bring empowerment. Because it is up to us to empower us. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Chocolate.
All right, everybody. That was a lot of jewels and a lot of information there. If you have any questions or comments, please email us at therealchocolatelife@gmail.com. Therealchocolatelife@gmail.com. That's it for this week. Until next time, stay ready so you don't have to get ready. And y'all be safe in these streets. And please stay vigilant. Be safe, everybody. Peace out, Chocolate Earth, Cocoa Earth. This is the Chocolate.